The other part of it, though, on a more mundane level, being in my mid 70s, a good life is a life where I get up in the morning. That's a big deal. I wake up. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm awake. And I get through the day and I do as little harm as possible before I go back to sleep. That's a good day for me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Rabbi Rami Shapiro. Rabbi Rami is an award-winning author of over 36 books on religion and spirituality. Rami received rabbinical ordination from the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, and holds a Ph.D. from Union Graduate School. Rabbi Rami co-directs One River Foundation, writes the foundation's newsletter, Ask Rabbi Rami, and is contributing editor for Spirituality and Health magazine, where he writes the advice column, Roadside Assistance for the Spiritual Traveler. Rami can be reached via his websites, rabbirami.com and oneriverfoundation.org. How are you, Rabbi Rami?
I'm doing great, Broderick. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I struggled to reading through that bio. I don't understand that. It's just one of those days. It's okay, though. Well, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. You have a pretty broad perspective on spirituality and religion. You've studied in various traditions, and you're a rabbi, and there's a long history there in the Jewish tradition. And it'd be fun to hear how all these pieces have come together for you as we explore this theme of what is a good life, or what is a life worthy of living. I use those questions interchangeably. Maybe I know that there are subtle differences. I know I can come up with subtle nuance differences in those phrases, but for simplicity's sake, I use those interchangeably, and we can kind of unpack what that looks like for you as we go on in this conversation. I know I just read the bio, but I like for guests to introduce themselves in whatever way you like beyond the script.
Yeah, well, I mean, the script is accurate, but only from the outside, right? So basically, my bio is I've been in love with spirituality, meditation, contemplative practice since I was 16. I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home, but I devoted 10 years of my life from 16 into my mid-20s to Zen Buddhism. I got a degree in Buddhist studies. I went to graduate school in Buddhist studies. I hated that. My Zen master told me I would hate it. He was right. I lasted 2 weeks in grad school in Buddhist studies. It was so academic. I mean, it was grad school. What did I expect? But it was horrible. I went to rabbinical school instead, hoping to find something more mystical there. I didn't. You don't find, at least my experience was, I didn't find the mystical in the academy. But I did find rebbes, that's the Jewish equivalent of gurus. I found rebbes, I found roshis, I found gurus and swamis in all different traditions who guided me in their path, which in my experience turned out to be the same path. So like you, because I can tell from the books behind you, we've followed similar paths and probably have had similar experiences in the non-dual Advaita Hindu realization that this isn't Sanskrit, this is Yiddish, but in Yiddish we say Alles ist Gott, everything is the divine, and that's my religion. I can talk about it in Judaism and Hinduism and Buddhism and Sufism and Christianity, in Islam. I mean, those are all dialects of the only truth I know, which is that everything is the divine. And that's how I spend my life, is just in that world, um, writing about it, meditating on it, um, sort of steeped in it.
Awesome. That's why I'm so excited about this conversation. You're speaking to my heart here. Like everything is the divine. Exactly. I've never used the term that they're all different dialects. I like that, actually. I wanted to use that.
More than what you can take anything I say. It's all free.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Different dialects. Yeah. I'm really excited for how all of this is going to unfold in this question that I asked here in the beginning. So, what makes a life worthy of living, and what is a good life? Because Socrates said that an unexamined life is not worth living, and that's a strong statement. And I think he was getting at is if we're not questioning or examining our lives, then it's not worth living that life. So this question is so important. It kind of initiated. Well, I shouldn't say initiated. He was one of the founding fathers, Plato, Socrates of Western philosophy, and that's like the foundation, supposedly, of Western philosophy is this question of ethics and morals and how we live. So, just curious to see what
Yeah.
that means for you.
Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying in a couple of ways. I mean, on the one hand, the question that sort of a mantra that I've got is, who am I? That kind of thing from Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj. Who is the I that's aware of my egoic self? I'm not Rami. Rami is a construct of all kinds of memories, things that my parents taught me. I mean, am I really Jewish? I mean, that's just something somebody made up. If I'm in my mid 70s, and I want to get to that in a second. But if someone came and said, you were adopted by your parents, and so your parents told you, your adopted parents told you were Jewish, but really you're Catholic. Well, what am I then? Am I Catholic? Am I Jewish? Or maybe you were raised by Jews, but you're really Muslim. Your parents are, I mean, it's absurd. It's just a story. So, and my entire sense of self is a story. I don't know if you're familiar with Byron Katie and her work. She asked this question, who are you without your story? And I think without your story, you could say you're nobody, or you're the only buddy. You're the divine I am. In Hinduism, there's the phrase aham brahmani, I am Brahman. But it's not the egoic I am. It's not like Rami is Brahman, I am God, Broderick is Brahman, and only Broderick is. I mean, that's absurd. That's narcissism. That's megalomania.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. A quick aside, stop me if I go on too long, but
Oh no!
when I was in rabbinical school, I was almost thrown out. I gave a talk and I said that I am God in the context of saying everything is God. And I was called into the dean's office and I said, and they said, we're going to expel you because that's megalomania to say you're God. And I said, look, a megalomaniac believes, in my case, he believes he's God. And I said, I don't believe I'm God. I know I'm God. That's all there is. And the guy was so pissed, he just threw me out of his office. And that was the last I heard about it. But the I am, that is everything, is your true nature, is your true self. So the well-examined life is the life that takes you beyond the ego to realize that I am. I mean, that's what Jesus says. When Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, Christians tend to think, I think erroneously, he means Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. But it's not. Jesus spoke Aramaic, not Greek and not English. And Aramaic is a cognative Hebrew. And in Hebrew, I am, Ehiyah, is the first name of God revealed in the Bible. So Jesus is saying, Ehiyah, I am, is the way, the truth, and the life. And no one gets to the divine except through I am consciousness. And that's what the Hindus say. That's what the Muslims say. That's what everybody says. So the well-examined life is the life that gets you to that. So I think that's crucial. The other part of it, though, on a more mundane level, being in my mid-70s, a good life is a life where I get up in the morning. That's a big deal. I wake up. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm awake. And I get through the day and I do as little harm as possible before I go back to sleep. That's a good day for me. And there's specifics I could get to, but that's, I don't want to go on forever, but those are two aspects of a good life for me.
Oh, thank you so much. Awesome. I love how you started with that, with the question, or addressing the question, referring to, let's just get beyond the sense of I. Let's actually look at that. It's, who am I? And when we do that, we can awaken to the aspect of ourselves. Words, again, language is limited.
Right.
I don't mean aspect that, it's too hard to even say it in the words, but for sake of trying to communicate.
It's a podcast.
That's
you gotta
right.
say something. Otherwise, if you're watching this or listening to this, Broderick and I are going to go
exactly
for an hour. We're just going to
just looking at each other, shaking our head.
It's like the Buddhist flower sermon where he just holds up a flower. And that's the whole thing. Yeah,
exactly.
We're gonna do that. That's it.
So we have to play the game, and so that's something I wanted to talk about as we go on this conversation. To this, the game that we're playing here, the theater that we're a part of. But to examine our lives, and I think this is not necessarily what was offered in what Socrates was talking about, or Plato was talking about. It was much more focused on. Let's look at these two ideas, and it's that concept of the absolute reality and relative reality. And I think the emphasis there was on relative reality, which is important.
Yeah.
But I love how you said, and you examine your life. You examine to look beyond the relative to see what is so-called absolute, to see who we are in our true nature. And I like to refer to it as the divine. You can refer to it as God. But we are that which is, we are an expression. We are us in our skins. We are, I like to call it a little perturbation in the field. We are excitation in this field of pure being or the divine. And in that excitation, we kind of lose sight of that we are the whole. And it behooves us to awaken to realize that we are the whole, we are that which is divine, and everything is an expression of that. And to start from that place can be quite amazing, because with that realization, you want to figure out, like, okay, then I live in this relative world. We're playing this language game here. How do I now take that divine realization, and how do I show, or how do I say this? Again, language is so hard to do this. How do I express that in the world, in my character, in the way that I be in the world as a self, as this narrative, this story that I've created?
Yeah. I mean, that's the question, right? So if to the extent that I know that you and I are both excitations of the divine, or both waves of the cosmic ocean, or whatever you want to say, it's less difficult. To the extent that I forget that, and I think you're somebody else, then you're other than me, then it's harder. So I want to come back to that more specifically, but the Bible says, love your neighbor or love the stranger as yourself. Now, I taught Bible both in the synagogue, but also at the university. When I was teaching Bible in the university, you get to Leviticus and you read, love your neighbor as yourself, love the stranger as yourself. And I asked the kids, what do you think that means? And they all heard, love the neighbor or love the stranger as you love yourself. But that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says, love neighbor, stranger as yourself, because there's only one self. Broderick and I are two excitations, two waves, two manifestations of the same self, which is the divine, or whatever you want to call it. When I know that, then how interesting. I'm looking at Broderick almost in a sense, right? Like I'm looking in a mirror. I'm a black guy, you know, and he's, I'm a black Southern Baptist guy, and he's a white Jewish guy. And how effing weird is that? So it's all one self. And if we had a woman here, that would be part of us also. So, the Bible says that the first person was male and female. And then, in chapter 2 of Genesis, and it's all metaphor. I don't take any of it literally, but, the creative force fashioned the human out of the dust of the earth. The rabbis thousands of years ago asked the question, what color was the dirt? Was it white sand? Was it dark sand? And they said, God took all the colors of the dirt that are there and made like plaid man, plaid woman, every color people were. And over time, we separated into different colors. But the self is all the colors, all the genders, So when I remember that, then loving my neighbor or the stranger as myself, because I know there's only one self, it's easier. When I forget that, it's more difficult. So it always comes back to who am I really? And then I realize, oh, you and I are the same in that absolute sense. But you need some kind of compass. You need some kind of, okay. So I think the golden rule, which exists in every tradition, sometimes in the positive, sometimes in the negative. Confucius was the first one to articulate it. Hillel in the Jewish tradition, they both did it in the negative. What's hateful to you, don't do to somebody else. And that's true for people and animals and plants. And, if you don't want to be abused, don't abuse nature, don't abuse humans. I think that is a good guiding principle. But if you got a second, I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah,
you might know this guy, Matthew Ricard.
Yes.
Okay, famous French Tibetan Buddhist monk. So when I was in the podcast business, I spoke with him a couple of times on my show. And one of those times we were talking about his book on compassion to animals. And I have no trouble being compassionate to big animals, cats, dogs, horses, camels, anything with eyes and a nose, that I can say, that sort of can anthropomorphize that kind of thing. But I asked him, I said, what about ants? Because I was having ants in my house and I was, killing them. And he said to me, what happens when you go to squish an ant? And I said, well, when I go to do it, the ant runs away. He doesn't, or he, I don't know how you tell the difference, but the ant doesn't stand there and just get squished. The ant tries to save itself. And he goes, why do you think that is? And I said, well, obviously the ant must have some consciousness of its own existence and it's trying to save itself. So Matthew Ricard said, look, the ant is sentient. It's part of this whole divine consciousness. It's another excitation like yourself. And when you become aware of that, as you're going to squish the ant, as you become aware of that, you can't do it. You can't kill it. So I thought, well, all right, I don't know. But then right after the show, the next time the ant was there, I go, ant. And I went to do it and the ant starts to run. And I said, crap, it's another sister, brother being. So I had to scoop them up and take them outside. And now I'm not perfect, but now if there's bugs, I try my best to scoop them up and take them outside. But again, I'm not perfect. I'm a work in progress, unless it's a mosquito on my arm. I hit those guys before I even know I did it. But what he said is if you examine what's happening, and it doesn't take, you don't have to be a mystic, you just have to be awake. If you examine what's happening, you see, no, it's a conscious being. In this case, an ant. It could be a tree. It could be a frog. It could be anything. You can't harm it once you know that it's a fellow sentient expression of the divine. So it's all about that, cultivating that kind of awareness, but it's not difficult. I mean, getting to know that I am the divine and I am the Father or one, that's okay, that's tough. But what we're talking about, I don't think is that difficult. Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, I had to just kill it. No. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. Oh man, 100% with you. Oh, you're yeah, there's so much in that. And you're right. I one thing I've realized, the whole ant thing, I feel that way about plants, Robbie. I
Yeah.
keep saying Rami. I'm mixing Rabbi and Rami
It's
together there. I wanted to call you Swami Rami, and now I'm calling you Robbie.
When I'm in India, because I'm an initiate in the Ramakrishna order, I wear orange,
Oh,
and
okay.
people come by and they do Swami Rami too. So
Okay.
it's fine.
It's coming from a place of love, I tell you,
That's fine.
and admiration. But yeah, I decided I struggle with that. The ants, mosquitoes, I just completely justify, and I know, and I still know. I'm like, oh, I really hate doing this. And my partner, I'm like, babe, I don't want. These flies. We have a lot of flies in here, and I'm like, I really don't want to do it. And I end up doing it, and I feel so awful. And I'm like, oh God, I got to do this. Most of the things I try to pick up, spiders and stuff like that. I don't try to kill.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't want to
we're
kill
not
any of it, to be
perfect.
honest. I know. And even the plants, I'm out there weeding. I'm like, this is so wrong. Why am I worried about weeding? Because I can sense this life in this plant. And I'm not saying this just to say this, audience. I really do feel this way. And it's hard for me sometimes to be, because I know that I'm like, if I really do believe what I say I believe about everything being a divine, and my whole objective in life is increase love and minimize suffering, then when I look at these creatures, just like you say, you see it like this ant is moving away from me. It doesn't want you. You try to do something to, if you kill one of them, a whole bunch of them, they're going to start running and spreading. There's some sentience there. There's some
Yeah.
consciousness there. Am I causing suffering intentionally here by getting rid of this because it's not comfortable for me? So it's an interesting
But it does get
internal
complicated
struggle.
because I mean, okay, so we're talking about ants or weeds, but let's say you're trying to grow food and the
Uh-huh.
weeds are coming in, they're going to ruin the food. And let's say it's not just food for you and your partner. And I mean, let's say you're in a community garden and the weeds or I don't know what comes to eat the food, some animal. And so the people are hungry. And I'm not saying you want to kill the animals. Maybe you capture them. I don't know. But the stuff is not just, oh, it's so simple. We let everybody die because the weeds have to live. It is more complicated. But
Exactly.
there are, if it comes from that place of awareness, it gives you something to work with. But it's at some point you have to go, no, I'm making a judgment. Feeding people is more important than letting the weeds eat, destroy the food.
Yeah.
So you make a decision, and if if karma is absolute, you come back as a weed and somebody plucks you.
I know, right? Yeah, and I think there's levels to that. Now you think,
Yeah, that's what I
like
mean.
animal suffering, and like, is it necessary? I think I always, we have this conversation about. So I taught nutrition in a community college for a few years, and I'm a vegan, but I don't try to tell people that they should be vegan, but I explain why I am. And we look at agriculture and we look at the environment and the consequences of the consumption of animals, or we look at animal husbandry and farming, even milk. People, I'm like, that's kind of a crazy thing what we do to take milk from these cows to consume. And is it necessary? It's not necessary to consume animals. It's not necessary to consume milk. You can get your nutrients without doing that. And you have to ask yourself that question. I'm not saying that listeners, you should be vegetarian. I'm not, definitely not. It's up to you. But when you do that evaluation, if I don't have to harm something in order for me to have sustenance, maybe I shouldn't do it. That's just the question. If I desire to mitigate suffering and mitigate harm, is it necessary for me to, in order for me to function in this body, is it necessary for me to engage in or support, say, for instance, I don't know, going to the grocery store and just getting animal products from these animal farms or whatever? Is it necessary for me to contribute to that level of barbarism and suffering? We have to ask ourselves that question.
No judgment, just barbarism.
I know, right? Well, it is, what's happening in the factory farms? I'm talking about the factory farms.
I get it. In the Bible, it depends. There's always it depends. So
I know, right? Yeah.
Generally speaking, I would say the more aware you are of the sanctions of beings and the divinity and all the stuff we've been talking about, the less harm you want to do, and you naturally don't eat meat, for example. But there's a but there. So, for example, Tibetan Buddhists eat meat because in Tibet, that's what you got. It's not like you have these fields where you're going to be growing corn or something. So, but in the Bible, because that's my root tradition, the Bible diet, the diet that is set for humans in the beginning in the book of Genesis, is vegan. Mm-hmm. And meat is just, it's not forbidden. It's just not on the list. It was never considered. The only time when meat is introduced in the story is after the flood, because there's no way to grow anything. The earth is saturated with water. And then the Bible says a really interesting thing. When meat eating is introduced, it says animals started to fear humans. Before that, humans and animals were in alignment. There was a simpatico. They got along. But once we started eating them, they feared us. The unity of the species was broken. And then the ideal diet is to go back to the vegan. But the kosher laws in Judaism make meat eating, originally made meat eating very, very difficult. Now, like you said, you go to the grocery store, you can buy kosher meat. But when they invented kosher code, it was to make meat eating nearly impossible. Mm-hmm. But again, if you're in Tibet, what are you going to eat? You got to eat. So you do what you have to do.
Exactly.
But most of the people who are listening to us don't live in Tibet. So they can't say, well, if the Tibetans do it, then I can do it. No, it's a question of, do you recognize, is the suffering you cause necessary? I mean, there's something in Judaism called tsar ba'alei chayim, the value of not causing unnecessary suffering. Mm-hmm. And you decide what's necessary and what's not necessary. So for me, I don't eat meat, but I do eat fish, just because I haven't gotten to the point. I mean, I know I'm eating a sentient being, but I haven't gotten to the point where I can not do that. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm not setting myself up as an example. I'm just saying, you ask that question, you come to that realization, and then you deal with it as best you can. Anyway, that's what we've been, that's what everyone needs to wrestle with. But wrestling is good. Even if you come to different conclusions. You don't eat fish. I eat fish. Someone else is going to have a Big Mac. But it's doing it mindlessly, to me, is the problem. Saying, yeah, I know I'm needlessly causing the animal suffering, and I don't give a damn. No, I'm working off your brutality thing. I'm participating in this brutal thing. At least you know what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right. And if Broderick comes back as a weed to be plucked, you'll come back as a cow to be slaughtered.
See, folks, this is the good life for me. This is it. It's when we're reflecting. This is the examine life. We have this situation. I've come to this awareness that that everything is an expression of the divine, and I have this desire to mitigate suffering. And then I have to wrestle with it. That's life.
That's it.
That's beautiful. It doesn't mean that it's all easy. It's We have to wrestle with our moment to moment experience. We have to wrestle with our choices. But one thing, like you're saying, what makes it easier or better is that when we do have that awakening, when we do have that realization that, oh, I am I, not Broderick, the I that extends beyond Broderick is everything. And like the Rastafarians say, I and I, it's everything. Everything's an expression of the divine. Now let me operate, maybe make my choices from that space. Now that I have that realization, and I have the language to help me make sense of that realization. And that's the question that I was going to ask you is, so for instance, because I think you can have a spiritual experience or a mystical experience that kind of blows you out of your current way of looking at things. And so for me, I've had a tremendous amount, not tremendous, I had a tremendous spiritual experience, or a very big spiritual experience when I was a kid as a Southern Baptist in church. And to be honest, where I grew up, spiritual experience come dime a dozen, because just the way, if anybody was going to the Southern Baptist church and you hear that singing, the way the preacher going, boy, you catch what we used to call catching the Holy Ghost. And so you can catch the Holy Ghost quite often, and there are different levels of that, of course, but you can have a profound experience where you are blown out. But what generally happens, and what happened to me, is that once I'm out of that experience, I'm like, Jesus is real. I am going to couch that experience in the narrative that I know, in the story that I know, that, all right, I had this profound spiritual experience, a profound awakening experience where I entered a state that was indescribable, ineffable. But when I came out of it, especially in the church setting, I am going to interpret that experience as this doctrine that I am a part of, this religion that I'm a part of, and its doctrine, it is the ultimate truth. And whatever the leaders of that particular religion or in that institution say about it, I'm going to take it on full on, and I'm going to interpret my experience as this is the truth. And if this truth says that everyone else is wrong except this one, I'm going to say, yes, I believe that now, because I had the experience that justifies this belief. So I think we can have that awakening experience, but if we don't have the language to interpret it in a way that is expansive in the way that we've been talking about, it can limit ultimately what we're going to end up doing in the world and the way we act in the world. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'm curious how you got out of that.
So, because over time, I went to college, start talking to people with different ideas, and kept being open. And I think that openness was because of those experiences. It wasn't just one. All that openness kept me interested. And I don't know, maybe I have a temperament too, because I want to know I want to know things. I want to question things. I'll never forget when I was in Sunday school one time, and I asked the Sunday school teacher, I started to question something about the Bible, and she said, well, you can't question God. You don't question the Bible. And I'm like, okay. And as I began to question things and ask these questions, when I finally said that, you know what, I don't think this is not right. This is because I kept reading stuff, but it still took me, Rami. It still took me about 10 years to finally believe that I'm not going to burn in hell, or not have this fear that what if I have it wrong? What if I'm wrong? And I think, yes, there was the indoctrination, but it was the spiritual experience associated with that indoctrination that had me afraid of, what if I get it wrong? What if I'm looking into all these different ideas and I'm wrong? It took a while, but I use my willpower to keep exploring and looking into various ideas that open me up to these different possibilities and experiences. So that's what happened for me. And so, because I think that there are levels of awakening, and I think is how it's interpreted. And if we only have a limited language, because I do believe that there are people that are super fundamentalist religious, but they're still kind people, they're still loving people, but they're still captured by a very restricted view of God, or very restricted view of spirituality, a view of the world, and then it kind of limits their capacity to do some of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, my first experience like that wasn't in a religion.
Mm,
Well, I mean, it was in the framework of Zen Buddhism, but Zen
see.
Buddhism doesn't have that dogma. Zen Buddhism is a direct transmission beyond words and letters. So they use the analogy of the finger pointing toward the moon, and the religion is like the finger. The reality is the moon. So whatever they say, it's not it. Or in Sanskrit, they use the term neti neti, not that, not that. So don't get hung up on the theology or the language or the story. It's not that. It's
Mm-hmm.
something ineffable. So I wasn't burdened by the strictures of the story or the theology or the language. Um, and then I was blessed with teachers in every tradition I worked in who were all coming from that expansive tradition. So my my Rebbe in the Jewish world, Zalman Schachter Shalomi, also was exposed to Zen and Hinduism and Taoism and all this stuff. So he also knew that there's a Jewish way of saying of approaching there's a Jewish finger pointing toward the moon and a Buddhist finger pointing toward the moon, but the moon isn't Jewish or Catholic or Buddhist or Protestant or anything else. So I was never locked into one path. I was focused on the moon, and I had this. I don't know. I was blessed with a 35-year relationship with Father Thomas Keating.
Mm.
And he was this great Catholic mystic who, in the 80s, created something called the Snowmass Group, where he invited 12 mystics from different traditions to spend a week with him at his monastery in Snowmass, Colorado. And he set it up so that we followed the prayer life of the monks. So we got up, at the different hours during the day. When they prayed, we prayed with them and we meditated and all that. And the rules for our time together, just the 12 of us, he said, you can't talk about your religious, what does your religion say about X? He says, we could look that up. We don't want to know. He says, you can talk about your experience of X. And what we found in the first couple of days was that we were all, and the word experience is wrong, but we were all having the same experience of the divine, which meant we were all disappearing, in our meditations, in our chanting, in our mantra work, in our prayer life, whatever it was. It's called in the Psalms, kalta nafshi. It's the annihilation of the separate self. And that's what happens. There's just no Rami for however long. And then Rami comes back. And then someone says, oh, you're Jewish, so therefore it's what you were talking about before. But everybody who was there says, yeah, I disappear. There's no Roshi. There's no Swami. There's no priest. There's no anything. And when I come back, regardless of the adjective that I'm working with, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, regardless of that, I feel this overwhelming connection to everything, with everything, and this love for everything and from everything. And that's what he wanted to talk about. This group lasted 35 years. I didn't stay with it all that time. I had a life and a job, and I had to do those things. But I stayed with him for all those years. And what I learned in that setting, and from him and so many other people, was it's possible to learn all those different languages, to be still rooted in your own language. I mean, I'm Jewish and that's my primary language, but I can learn the other languages and I can see the parallels from in the Hebrew and the Sanskrit and the Pali and the Latin and the Greek. I can, in the Arabic, I can see all the parallels and see how the cognates, how the synonyms in the different languages, without saying one's right and one's wrong, and seeing them all just pointing in the same direction. And it's the direction I'm interested in, and the moon I'm interested in, and the fingers are fascinating, but they're not the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that because, I mean, I think this is the future. What you've done with your life, the work that you're doing, um, really integrating these different perspectives. And I think there's space for the new religion, because we can be captivated and captured by the finger. I think it is
Yeah.
fascinating. But when we double down too much on the finger and we pretend that these truths happen to certain peoples in these stories thousands of years ago, and that's it, and there's nothing that's happened. There's been no God hasn't revealed anything
Yeah.
since then. There's no more revelation. It's just that these stories, and I've heard you say in another podcast with someone else how these stories, the caretakers of those stories are unfortunately using them as a tool for controlling the masses, and we're not willing to update. I don't have a problem with religion at all. I mean, if I don't belong to a particular religion, but I think there needs to be an update. If you're not updating these ideas, these concepts, the story, the narrative, then you're going to get stuck and you're going to get fundamentalism that creates harm, that contributes to suffering. Is there any fundamental, I can't say it right. Is there any fundamentalism out there that does not contribute to suffering? Maybe, maybe so. But a lot of times, fundamentalism can contribute to suffering, unnecessary suffering, and being willing to update. And I think people like you and the work that you're doing is encouraging us to. It's important for us to update our ideas, our stories, our narrative, because ultimately, even when we have an awakening experience, we tend to couch that awakening experience into a narrative, a story. And if that narrative and story is not expansive enough, it's going to limit our capacity to express that universal divine nature in the world. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so,
For most of us, our gods are too small.
yeah,
Yeah. They're
exactly.
too narrow. They're too narrow. And I mean, I don't know about if the word is update or just look at the religions as metaphor,
Yeah.
uh, and stop reading the theologians and read the mystics. Don't listen to the clergy. Listen to the mystics. The
Right.
mystics are where they all come together because the mystics have the experience of the oneness, and the theologians are. I mean, they're selling various brand named products,
Yeah.
um, and it's madness.
Yeah. One of the things, so, on a previous podcast, I mentioned that, and I say this contextually, that, people talk about enlightenment and stuff like that. I'm like, well, enlightenment, it can be overrated. And what I mean by that is because I think that there's levels of awakening, and I think liberation is a lot more difficult than awakening, a lot more. And I think that my challenge in killing these insects when they're bothering me is an expression of the difficulty of liberation, to be completely liberated. But the reason why I say that it can be overrated is that how do we a life well lived in terms of living a good life, or living well. Um, it's talking about the relative world. How am I showing up in the theater? How is my character showing up in this theater? How am I playing this game? Now, I might have a realization that I'm playing from my divine nature, But what does that look like? What does that look like on the ground? Yeah, can you say? So I have my ideas, but I want to hear what you have to say about what does that look like in the world. Some examples, I suppose. Again, there's no one way, of course, but
Yeah.
some examples
Yeah.
of what
Yeah. I
that look
mean,
like.
it changes by this according to the situation. The situation is constantly changing.
Yes,
Um, I mean, if I needed an overall guiding principle, it's don't be an asshole. So,
exactly.
I mean, that's it, right?
That's it.
But there's in Judaism, there's a mantra that you can use when you're wandering around, and it's Psalm, I think it's 116, but don't hold me to it. And it says, "I place the Lord before me always." That's the standard English translation, but it doesn't actually mean that. But I see the divine manifesting in everything, and the idea is when you're approaching another being, human or otherwise, you're repeating this in your head so that when you see the homeless person or you see uh, we have several people who are suffering from real mental problems, and they're homeless and they're wandering around. They can be quite intimidating, scary. But if you can remind yourself, no, this is God happening here. It's not like you know what to do, and you're gonna. I mean, you don't know what to do, and you don't want to go embrace them because they may totally freak out. But you know it's the divine, so you don't approach them with this great armor. I mean, just the other day, and I'm not suggesting anybody do this because it could have ended very badly. But I was walking my dog, which I do 5 miles a day at different times during the day. And we were walking and we are almost home. And there was this guy, and it was starting to rain. And there was this guy out in front of my house. We live in a small town. There's buses, but there's no bus stop. You can sort of wave and the bus stops. And he was trying to get a bus, and he was having trouble. The bus wasn't stopping, and he needed to go somewhere. And he said, "Could you give me a ride? I don't know this guy from, I don't know who he is." But I just felt, maybe because we were walking and chanting, and I just felt, oh, God needs a ride. So I took the dog in the house, and I told my wife, I didn't say I got to give God a ride. I mean, that wasn't that stupid. But I said, I'm going to give this guy a ride. And I picked him up and we had a conversation in the car, and he wanted to go to this restaurant. So I took him. And the whole time, I mean, I didn't know this guy. I could have been at risk. I have no idea. But I just felt here is a God needing a ride to a Chinese restaurant. And it just was seamless. It wasn't like, oh, I'm so great. And I could have killed an ant, but I'm going to do this for this guy instead. It was nothing like that. It was just,
Yes.
okay, I'm going to help him out. Another day, I might have said, I'll call you an Uber. Or I might have said, quick, get in the house, bar the doors. I'm not going to, I don't know. But if you can do something for somebody and it doesn't put you at risk, because I don't want anyone to get in trouble, get hurt, and then you do it. But it's the more, if you can prime the pump through, I mean, chanting is my primary practice. If you can prime the pump through mantra chanting, whether it's Hebrew stuff or um, in Sanskrit or whatever your tradition is, if you can prime the pump, you're setting yourself up to see the divine. Then there are just these moments when you can be of service, and there's no ego in it. It's not like, I'm going to be a good person today. It's just, oh, the universe is offering me a chance to serve. God needs a ride to the Chinese restaurant. Let me give him a ride. I don't know if that makes any sense, but there's nothing dramatic about any of it. When it's a drama, it's ego. So, I mean, I'm telling you a story, so maybe there's ego now. But at the moment, it was just, give him a ride. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to get
Oh
across?
yeah. Oh yeah, I think so. I think, how do we let's use a language that people are accustomed to. I mean, if you're an atheist, you probably don't like this language. Or you may some atheists don't even like the divine, whatever, consciousness, pure awareness,
Yeah,
but God.
same
But
thing
when
for me.
yeah, me too. When we talk about God, we're referring to, when I call it, again, I'm just using language. Language is a symbolic representation of that can't really contain it. So it's beyond any word I can use anyway. But when my intention for calling it the divine, that there's something sacred about it. And when there's something sacred, there's a certain specialness associated with it. And it's something I want to care for, that I have an admiration for, that I want to love. And so when I see you as the divine and I see everything else as the divine, then it's sacred to me. It's a trick from my mind to encourage me to act and behave in a way that reflects what in my experience, I know to be true. And that's what I mean by having the language, even though language only guides us, but having a language that helps facilitate the expression of that realization in the world. So when I'm in front of someone, how can I'm going to use certain words that we tend to say that exemplifies what we think the divine is, an expression of the divine, kindness. Okay, I want to be kind, compassionate, loving, tender, showing people grace. All those different words can help us see or behave in a way with others, if, for example, in relationship to another person, as though they are the divine, as though they are, because they are, but our ego, our self, who's contained in this narrative, this story, needs to be reminded. And that's what the practice is for. The practice ain't for God, for my original nature or my whole full nature. It's for the excited aspect of God. That's Broderick. All of those practices, which I love, I love going into those spaces, is to help develop the character that I am playing in this world as an expression of the divine. And I feel like it's my perspective. It's my responsibility, the way I talk to myself.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility to cultivate and develop my character and develop and evolve myself so that I can show up in the world in a loving, beautiful way that I think exemplifies the divine. And the reason why I say enlightenment can be overrated is that I'm always on that path. It's a process. It's not arriving. I am arriving. I haven't arrived. I am arriving, and I'll be arriving to that place to the day I die
Yeah.
because it's a process of moving in that direction. So,
Yeah. In the relative world, we're always working on that. In the
yeah.
absolute, there's no arriving. You're just there. But I interact with beings in the relative. So that's why I like chanting. And it's once you find a mantra, I have a lot of them. But once you find a mantra that works for you, they arise almost spontaneously. I'll give you another example if you don't mind. So one of the things I hate is standing in line. I guess I don't like it. I get really, oh, come on, let's move this through this quick. I was standing in line at a dollar store, and the line is, I don't know, 6, 7 people deep, and I'm at the end, and I really just want to get my stupid thing or getting something. It's a long time ago from my mother, and it's just one thing. It's $1. Everything in the store is $1. It's a dollar store, and all of a sudden, the cashier gets into the microphone, and she says, "Price check," and I'm like, "What do you mean price check? It's the dollar store. Everything is $1. We all know how much the item is. It's $1." What she meant was she needed the code that was missing from the price, and we're all waiting in line for someone to come and give her the code. Well, I'm pissed because I don't want to be there, and I'm just getting aggravated. And then a mantra comes into my head, and it's a Hebrew word, harachaman. It means the compassionate one. And it just goes in my head. It's just going harachaman, harachaman. And I've been doing these things for a long time. So my body it's like Pavlov's dog. So as soon as it clicks in, my breathing slows, my my heart rate softens, my breathing softens, my heart rate slows down, my body relaxes. And by the time I got to the front of the line, I was cool, right? I wasn't angry. I was totally mellow. I completely commiserated with her because she was aggravated that the line was getting longer and she was holding everybody up, and it wasn't her fault. By the time I got up there, she said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Hey, it's fine. I have nowhere else to be." I was like Ram Dass. I'm just being here now. It was like I wasn't Rami anymore. I was just a divine being buying a divine being card with a cashier divine being. It was just like everything is cool. And it was the chanting. It wasn't me going, "Be better." It was just these, for me, chanting practice, mantra practice is just a way of getting my relative self to open to the divine self. And that does all the work. It just, it happens. It's grace, but I have to start, though by now the chant just comes to me. Even that's grace. But once the chant starts, the whole thing takes over and I don't have to do anything.
You're stressing the importance. I think this is where I think I like where I say I don't have a problem with religious traditions. Again, not the best set of words to use there, but when they can offer tools, these various tools to help us in this relative world, how to live a good life, for me, I like to use how to be a beacon of love and light in the world. How do I be a beacon of love? What tools do I have available to me? Various practices, various actions that I can take. Because in this relative world where I am Broderick, I am a construct, I'm an ideological construct, but I'm also a construct of habits. And if I can change my habits, that's what I love about the contemplative traditions. It's all about, not all about, but a lot of it is about habit changing. The path of the yogi is cultivating and engaging in action that supports a particular end. And when we're engaging in those actions, we're cultivating habits. And then those habits become hardwired into our system. And they help facilitate a way of being in the world. And we choose habits that are going to help us illuminate the divine in some capacity. And how do we know what the divine possibly looks like? Well, we can go to our own experience, our spiritual experience, if we've had it. If we haven't had it, like you said, go study the mystics, study people who've had that experience. What are they saying about it? Compare notes, compare what different people are saying about it, and then see how can I now develop a character, a role. How can I play a role to facilitate this in my life? And how I relate to other human beings. I think it's a beautiful way of living. I think that's the good life. And it's like you said, you're in the line, you're getting pissed, you're getting annoyed. I'm bound to get annoyed every day about something. I'm reading and I'm doing something, I'm trying to write, and my partner comes up, hey, blah, blah, blah. And I love her to pieces. But in a moment, I'm like, I'm so annoyed. Don't bother me. Or I give a little frown, and I'm like, that frown was unnecessary. It's a process, folks. Some of you are like, that's nothing. And I'm like, well, for me, I don't want to be just frowning at people and putting that energy out, because I am a constant. It is living a good life to me is a constant process. It's a constantly working on, quote unquote, working on ourselves to illuminate that realization that I know is true. And I think you agree. Maybe you agree with me. I don't think it's easy. It's not
No,
easy to actually live it. It's
no.
easy to recognize, and once you recognize, you're like, oh, I know. That becomes easy. But now trying to live it, oof, it can be
Yeah.
brutal.
And there's a difference. And there's a lot of people who know it, who can't live it, or
Exactly.
who know it, who pretend to live it and cause a lot of damage.
Yes, that's why I say enlightenment can be overrated. It's what do you call it? It's kind of an antagonistic statement,
Yeah,
but
but
that's why.
yeah, there are a lot of people who are, I don't know, spiritual bullies,
Yes,
like that. But they say the right thing, and maybe they even know what's true, but they can't live it. They can't. They can make money off of it, but they can't do much else.
Oh, that's exactly it. So I almost what's the word? I guess antagonist is the word, but there's another word I'm looking for where I'm kind of I say provocative. Yeah, certain things I say that are provocative because of what you just said. Because you know, you know, Rami started off by talking about this examining our lives to come to realization of our divine nature and who we are at our core. But doing that is not just enough if you're going to continue to live in the world. And we see this, and because I want to say this before we stop this conversation, because a lot of people, because they may have experienced had a negative experience with a guru or someone who supposedly have had some type of realization, and then they're completely run away from it. Like, oh yeah, I don't want to deal with any of this kind of stuff. That's just a bunch of BS. I'm like, no. Some folks with good intention, some who don't have good intention, they do have that realization. They do have that knowledge. But for various reasons, because of the narrative, they feel like they don't have to cultivate themselves to be an exemplar of that in the world. Oh, I have the realization, so I know everything is God. I'm an expression of God, and I'm not going to work on developing my character. The character piece is tremendously important. And that's what I do like about the Greek tradition, because there was an emphasis on the character development piece. And that we can have that realization of who we are as a divine, have that absolute realization. But in this world where we're interacting with people, where I'm playing Broderick, it behooves me to develop the characteristics that are in line with the values associated with the absolute. And that requires practice and work. My yoga teacher, Baba Hari Das, I don't know if you're familiar with the Mount Madonna Yoga Center. And, people were asking him about, is he enlightened? He's like, no, I'm not enlightened. He's like, so what do you do once you get enlightened? Well, you practice. It's like, you keep practicing. You keep cultivating the qualities. Don't get caught up in that. Yes, that's good. But if you're not cultivating the qualities, you're going to be exactly what you're saying, not to be an asshole. And I think I agree with you. Yes, I say love, be loving and all that, but don't be an asshole. You want to live a good life, don't. And like, well, what does that mean? Like, when you really look into it, there's a lot of things involved in not being an asshole.
Amen, Brother Broderick.
Swami Rami. I really like that. Well, we're coming to a close here. I mean, I don't know. I've loved chatting with you. I hope I didn't talk too much.
Oh no, this is great. I love the conversation.
I haven't had this conversation. I haven't interviewed with someone such as yourself where I can talk about it in this way and feel comfortable doing that. And I really appreciate that. Do you have any final words that you would like to share with the audience before
I think we really
down?
covered it. I think all this stuff, all the knowledge, all the awareness has to be translated into concrete behavior. I think you have to look at your diet. I think you have to look at how you spend your money. I think you have to look at how you treat the people in your life, the animals in your life, the plants and the earth, all that. It's all part of this. It's all part of spiritual practice. Yeah, it's all God, but in the absolute sense, but we live in the relative world as well. It's exactly what you said. So if people can begin to do that, there's hatha yoga, there's karma yoga, there's probably the yoga of money,
Right.
There's all these things that we can be doing. And if you think any of it is either beneath me as a spiritual person, nothing is beneath you as a spiritual person.
No.
It's all what Ram Dass called grist for the mill, right? To make it all holy.
Mm. Oh, so beautifully said. And on that note, I haven't done this yet, but I think you're such a wealth of knowledge. Do you have I know this is on the spot. Can you think of at least 3 books that you recommend or anything like that? I don't care, it can be any kind of learning medium, your old podcast, anything that you recommend that can help people clarify and understand what it is, where we were coming from and where you're coming from with this.
I've written 36 books. You can read mine. But
Exactly.
I'll tell you what.
Out of those 36,
Well,
which
I mean, I could plug my own book. If I was plugging my own book, of my own books, I have a book that fits what you and I are talking about called Perennial Wisdom for the Spiritually Independent. And it asks 5 questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where do I go when I die? How should I live for that? And why? Those are the 5 questions. And it looks from the perspective of all the religions that we've been talking about. But I would also look at, and I know you've read these books, um, and you can help me with the titles because I can see them in front of me, but too far away to actually read the title. Talks by Ramana Maharshi,
mm-hmm.
and I Am That, I think it's called, by Nisargadatta Maharaj. I mean, these 2 guys from India in the early 20th century, I guess. They come out of India, they come out of Hinduism, but they just speak directly to the divine self that everyone is. And, I just think their stuff is, their dialogues are just people coming to find them. Sargadatta Maharaj ran a cigarette, like a 7-Eleven kind of thing, cigarettes and candy store, and he lived upstairs, and people would just go up and sit and talk to him. And he wasn't a scholar. He was just awake. And you just ask him questions. There's another guy who's more modern. He was actually I think the president of the Bank of India, called Ramesh Balkazar. And Leonard Cohen is my favorite musician. Leonard Cohen went to see him in India several times. And it's the same thing. You just go sit in his room and say, so what is this? And he would just say, this is my experience. So these are dialogues. My book is more collection of text and my commentary on them. But anyway, those are some guys to look into.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rami, thank you so much. This has been beautiful. I hope our conversation continues in some capacity. Really appreciated you answering my email and my request to come on the podcast and share your wisdom. Man, I can sit here and I love your voice, the sound of your voice. I love how you put things into the way you play with words. I guess all those years of writing. I love it. And listeners, I encourage you to check out Rami's work. He's produced a lot. Yes, 36 books, but many conversations that he's had on his podcast. Can you mention the podcast? Because I know it's still out there. Because I'm listening to
I don't
the
do
name of it.
podcasting anymore, except as a guest once in a while. It's called the Body, Mind, Spirit FM network, I think.
Yeah.
I've sort of lost track. You can go on YouTube and Google me.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to look at it right quick because I want to mention it before we sign off, because I want the audience to look it up because, I started listening to your interviews, even the way you interview, the conversations you've had with folks. Explore Spirituality.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that podcast is there, and there's tons of them, tons of conversations that Rami had, and I think you would benefit tremendously from listening to that.
Thank you
podcast.
For that. This was fun for me too, Broderick. Thank you. I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you invited me on the show.
Awesome. So much fun. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow,
write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.